My grandmother's attic has one rule: don't touch the covered mirror. When I was 11, my parents sent me to live with my grandmother for the summer. Her house stood on the edge of town, a crooked old Victorian with a roof that sagged like tired shoulders and windows that always seemed to watch the road. The moment I arrived, she welcomed me with her usual tight smile, her silver hair pulled back in a bun that looked like it had never loosened in decades. After setting my suitcase down, she took me aside and gave me just one rule. "Don't touch the covered mirror in the attic," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the heavy air of the house. No explanation, no warning story, just that command. And the way her eyes lingered on mine, pale and unblinking, made me promise without a single question. The attic itself was a place that felt like another world. Every step up the narrow staircase groaned as if the wood was remembering the weight of the years. Dust clung to the air like smoke, catching thin beams of light that forced their way in through the cracks in the roof. Trunks, moth-eaten furniture, and boxes with faded handwriting were stacked in precarious towers, a graveyard of forgotten things. And then there was the mirror. It stood in the farthest corner, almost hidden beneath a thick black sheet that looked too new compared to everything else around it. Even from across the room, I could feel the wrongness seeping out of it, like the air got heavier in its presence. I never meant to go near it, but every day I caught myself glancing in its direction, my curiosity gnawing at me like a hungry animal. At night, I swore I heard it. Faint sounds, like fingertips brushing against glass or someone exhaling softly through their teeth. Sometimes, when the house was especially quiet, I heard my name in those whispers. I told myself it was the creak of the beams, the sigh of the wind through cracks in the walls, but deep down I knew it came from the attic. One night, I woke up to find the door to the attic standing wide open. The sheet of black fabric had slipped down just enough to reveal a corner of glass. And in that reflection, even though I was still in my bedroom, I saw movement, a shadow standing too close behind me, swaying, waiting. I tried to avoid the attic after that, but something kept drawing me up. On the final night of my stay, I couldn't resist. The pull was stronger than fear, stronger than sense. I climbed the steps in the dark, my breath shallow, my body trembling with something between dread and need. The sheet was gone completely this time. The mirror stood uncovered, its glass polished as though someone had been tending to it all along. I expected to see myself, but what stared back was not me. It was taller, thinner, with my same eyes stretched too wide, my smile curled too sharp. Its hands pressed against the glass, nails tapping faintly as though impatient. And then, without my touch, without my permission, the surface rippled like water. The next thing I remember is my grandmother pulling me out of the attic, her voice frantic, her arms surprisingly strong. The mirror was covered again. The sheet tied tight with twine. She never asked me what I saw. She never explained what it was. All she said, in a voice that shook with something close to fear, was, "You broke the rule. That thing knows you now. Don't ever come back here." Even now, years later, whenever I pass a mirror, I hesitate before looking in. Sometimes, just for a second, the reflection doesn't move the way I do. And when the room is very quiet, I still hear it, the faint tapping, the whispers of my name, waiting for me to disobey again. I moved out of my grandmother's house long ago, but the mirror never let me go. In my apartment, the bathroom glass sometimes fogs over in strange shapes, not like steam patterns, but as if fingers are pressing from the other side. Once, after a long shower, I wiped the fog away and saw two sets of eyes looking back at me. They were mine, but wrong, too wide, too hungry, too aware. I screamed and staggered backward, but when I looked again, it was only me, trembling and pale. I smashed that mirror that night, but shards stayed embedded in the corners of the room, and no matter how many I picked out, I kept finding slivers the next morning. They glittered faintly in the dark, as though catching a light that wasn't really there. My sleep hasn't been safe either. Dreams carry me back to that attic. I see the dust floating in the air like ash, the cobwebs trembling as though something is moving behind them. The mirror is always there, covered in its old, moth-eaten sheet. But in my dreams, the sheet moves, slowly lifting itself, as though something beneath is breathing. Sometimes I wake with my hands outstretched, as though I've been reaching for it in my sleep. Other times, I wake to the sound of tapping, faint at first, then sharper, like fingernails against glass, coming from the darkest corner of my bedroom. I've tried to avoid mirrors altogether, but it's impossible. They're everywhere, in shop windows, in elevators, in the glossy surface of my phone screen. And the reflection never quite matches. At first, it was small, a blink too late, a tilt of the head in the wrong direction. But now it lingers longer. Once, in a crowded subway car, I caught my reflection in the window. I was staring at it, but it wasn't staring back at me. It was looking over my shoulder, its mouth moving silently, forming words I couldn't hear. When the train passed through a tunnel and the glass turned dark, I could still see its teeth glowing faintly in the blackness. The voices are louder now. Sometimes they call my name when I'm alone, soft and coaxing, other times urgent and commanding, begging me to come back. I don't know what they mean by that, back to the attic, back to the mirror, back to something else entirely. But I know I've been marked, claimed in some way the night I lifted that sheet. The mirror didn't just want me to look, it wanted me to see. And now, it follows, stretching itself through every reflective surface, no matter how small. Last week, I woke in the middle of the night and found my wardrobe mirror uncovered. I don't even remember owning one that size. The sheet I had taped over it was on the floor, folded neatly, as if someone had placed it there with care. I forced myself to look, and there I was, standing in the reflection, but not in my bed. My reflection stood at the foot of the bed, smiling, its head slowly tilting in ways no neck should bend. My real body couldn't move, paralyzed under the sheets, while the other me leaned closer in the glass, tapping once against the surface with its long, yellowed nails. I screamed, and the sound cracked the silence like shattering glass. When I blinked, the mirror was gone. Just an empty wall where it had been. But the folded sheet was still on the floor. And when I picked it up, it smelled like my grandmother's attic, old wood, mildew, and something sour, metallic, like blood dried long ago. Now, I live in constant dread. I've taped over every reflective surface in my apartment, but I can still feel its gaze through the walls. Every night, I hear faint fingernails dragging across the glass, even though there are no mirrors left. It waits, patient and hungry, behind whatever veil I've placed. One day, I know I'll hear the sound again, not faint but thunderous, not tapping but shattering. And when that day comes, it won't matter if I look away. Because the mirror isn't in the attic anymore. It's already here, and it knows I can't resist forever. The change began subtly, as though reality itself was loosening its seams. One evening, while pouring water into a glass, I noticed the liquid shimmer unnaturally. It wasn't water anymore, it was a reflective surface, flat as a mirror. And there, staring back at me, wasn't my face, but the other one. The thing that had followed me out of the attic. Its grin stretched too wide, revealing teeth that seemed to go back endlessly into the dark. My hand trembled, spilling the water, but even on the floor the puddle reflected that same face, whispering soundlessly, its eyes locked on mine as though begging me to lean closer. I ran from the kitchen, but the voices followed, seeping through the walls. Sleep became impossible. Whenever I drifted off, I found myself standing in the attic again, the sheet gone, the mirror uncovered and humming faintly, like a living thing. My reflection was never still. Sometimes it copied me too late, sometimes it didn't copy me at all. One night in the dream, it stepped forward, pressing against the inside of the glass, its lips brushing the barrier as it whispered my name. The sound didn't come from the dream, it came from inside my own skull, vibrating through me like a disease. I woke with blood dripping from my ears, the taste of iron in my mouth, as if the whispers had burrowed too deep to escape. Days blurred into each other. Every screen, every window, every polished surface became a trap. My phone refused to turn off, its black screen glowed faintly, always showing my reflection even when the camera was covered. Once, in broad daylight, I caught sight of myself in the microwave's metal door. My reflection didn't blink. Instead, it slowly raised its hand and dragged one long nail across its throat, leaving a streak of red against the glass. I stumbled back in horror, only to find the mark bleeding across my own skin. Thin, shallow, but undeniably real. It was no longer content to mimic. It was beginning to act. I tried staying in the dark, covering every surface, but the dark was worse. Without the mirrors to contain it, I could feel it moving around me, just outside my vision. At night, the air shifted as though someone taller, heavier, breathed behind me. The faint smell of mildew and rot from my grandmother's attic lingered, growing stronger until it drowned out everything else. I began to hear footsteps pacing my apartment when I was still, and whispers seeping from the ceiling vents, "Let me out. Let me in. Let us be one." The boundary between us snapped 2 nights ago. I had boarded over the last reflective surface, a full-length mirror in the hallway that I had covered months before. But at 3 a.m., the sound of glass cracking ripped through the silence. I bolted upright in bed, heart racing, and saw light spilling down the hall, faint, silvery, as though moonlight were trapped behind the wood. The boards groaned as something pressed from the other side, straining, testing. Then, one by one, the nails shot out, clattering across the floor. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. And then I saw it, my reflection stepping through the frame, glass dripping from its body like water, its skin pale and rippling as though it were made from the surface of a pond. It smiled at me with my own face, though the eyes were bottomless voids, black wells pulling me forward. Its movements were fluid, boneless, wrong. When it opened its mouth, I heard the voices all at once, the whispers from every dream, every sleepless night, every glassy surface I had ever glanced into. They weren't calling me anymore. They were singing, a chorus of hunger and triumph. The air turned icy as it stretched its hand toward me, its fingers too long, ending in jagged nails like broken shards of glass. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My throat locked. My body refused to obey. All I could do was stare as it leaned close, pressing its cold forehead against mine, our faces mirroring perfectly. The glassy smell of old dust and blood filled my lungs as it whispered, "Now we switch." The world shattered. I felt myself falling, my body tearing apart like reflection breaking across a lake. I was yanked downward, swallowed whole by a suffocating darkness, while the other me stepped forward into the world I had left behind. For a moment, I thought I saw the attic again, the original mirror, vast and endless, with countless others inside it. And in every one, I saw people pounding against the glass, their mouths wide in silent screams, their eyes begging for a release. And then I understood, the mirror wasn't just an object. It was a door, and behind it was a prison of endless selves, each trapped when their reflection finally took their place. My grandmother hadn't covered it to keep me out. She had covered it to keep them in. Now I sit here, on the wrong side, my palms pressed against the cold glass, screaming for a world that cannot hear me. My reflection, my replacement, wears my face, walks my life, and speaks with my voice. Nobody will ever know it isn't me. But sometimes, just sometimes, I see the way it smiles too long, or laughs at the wrong moment. And I know it's learning. One day, someone will notice. Someone will ask what's wrong. And when they do, the reflection will turn, smile that stretched, broken smile, and say, nothing at all. And then, when they look closer, when their gaze lingers just a moment too long, the mirror will find them too.